Memorial Day was started after World War I to honor all those who had died. Many of them in that tragic war, it was just cruel, wasted lives. Nothing was advanced. The borders didn't change very much. It was just a waste. And it was thought to be the war to end all wars. It was the First World War, which means it wasn't the last. And there have been for us as a country many or several more since, none of which I've liked, I must say, just if you, I'm not trying to make a political statement here, but I wasn't in favor of the Vietnam War and I wasn't in favor of Iraq, and I could understand why we went to Afghanistan, but really, we move with all the power and the enormous capacity we have as a country, sometimes way too cavalier. And with the destructive power that wars have, we need to be a bit more circumspect, I think, in how we use it. Because it's not just that we waste a lot of money, but we take our precious men and women and their precious men and women, and we ask them to face the worst experiences that we can come up with. And also is true, especially of my generation that went to Vietnam, they come home, and that we all want to put behind us, and they live with it from then on. And so we're doing today's conversation is really about our relationship with the past. And so I don't want to become too heavy. But if we don't grok that the Vietnam War was a waste, and much of what we've done since then has been a waste, we're just going to do it again. And the pain and the suffering from generation to generation to generation to generation to generation to generation, 7 generations down the road, will continue. I hope we've learned something from the past. That being said, I think we should really honor those who took the risk of doing what this country asked them to do, to go and to do something that they knew would be difficult, and to risk, and many risked and suffered a lot, and still do. I was watching this rapper who died yesterday, 38-year-old rapper, talking about his PTSD and rapping about his PTSD and his descent into alcohol and etc. And the need to come back from that. Now, the same energy that we call warrior energy, that is one of those powerful expressions of the masculine, both in women and in men, this powerful state of being a warrior that was so called upon in battle, needs to be called upon again in healing as well, perhaps differently. But the power to heal and to move on should also be our collective call, that we stand with the people who we have asked to do difficult things, that we stand with them in their difficulty, in returning. One of my favorite books of all time was The Odyssey, which is about Odysseus, Ulysses, returning from the battles in Troy that the Greeks went over there. One more invasion in another country, some victories, some defeats. But the story of the Odyssey is the return of Ulysses home. It takes him 10 years. And it's a story of success and failure, success and failure, success and failure. And finally, he returns home with nothing. He has lost everything except his wiles and his determination and his spirit But all his men were lost. His boats were lost. He comes home, he shipwrecked ashore, essentially. That was his return. And he sneaks home unrecognized by everyone except his 20-year-old dog. And you know how rare they are. So, nobody really recognized him. He comes disguised in rags. He is the king of Ithaca. And he comes to the palace looking like a pauper. And so it is for many of our returning warriors. They come back and they're not recognized. And who they are underneath the scars is still heroic, but we often just see the scars. And in the story, Odysseus, of course, gets his kingdom back. His house has been invaded by suitors, and they have been eating and drinking all his wealth. And they've been trying to woo his wife, Penelope, who has been dutifully chaste and not giving any of them any quarter. But Odysseus wipes them out single-handedly, well, with his kind of almost useless son, but he wipes them out single-handedly, and that becomes his return. And many people think the story ends there, but it doesn't. He then has to go on a pilgrimage, essentially, to the north to return an oar to take an oar to some place which I've never really understood, but it's like he had to go on one more spiritual journey before he was done. And I think if we take this story a little bit deeper, we will see that the return from war is winning, losing, coming down to your essential self and hopefully finding it and returning with strength and grace from there back to your status as the man or woman you were before, but with something extra, something you have learned, something that only someone who has been through this tragedy and this winning and losing and winning and losing and redemption can come back. They come back with something that the world is better for, even though the path to it was horrible. This is the hero's journey when they eventually return. And in that returning, they have something to give. So I think we could also look at this not just for those who go to war, but for everybody. I was reading Richard Rohr. Do you know who Richard Rohr is? He's a Franciscan, I think. And basically he writes from a place not so much of most self-help books anyway, that say you can do it, don't let anyone get in your way. He goes, life is quite difficult. And we often are knocked down really hard. And if we're not wise enough, we will think that something wrong has happened, or that we will make a major mistake and think we have failed. And his way of twisting this draws on the Judeo-Christian tradition of the tragic life in which tragedy happens only to allow for the redemption to bring back the person or the country to a higher state. And the most classic example in Western society is the life of Jesus, which goes along pretty well until Easter week, and then it goes terribly wrong, only to be reborn as the Christ that has been the symbol of God's presence on earth for 1 billion people today. This death and resurrection is the arc of transformation. It is the arc of life really. And when we think it should not be that way, we only find it harder to recover from it. It should never have happened that I made that stupid mistake, sold all my stock in 2008, or bought a house last year. Whatever. Do you know what I mean? We always think that these are big mistakes, but they are learning experiences. And having done a few of them, I realize that there's no road you take that doesn't take you where you want to go. Some of them are longer, but that's the adventure of life anyway, isn't it? Some are longer, but they all get you back there. My classic example that I occasionally tell, and only tell part of because it's embarrassing to tell all of it, is I thought when I was 30 I had done something that would keep me from being a spiritual leader, which is what I thought I would always be. I kind of grew up with that from the age of 6. I thought I would be that thing. I had done something, and so I had never done anything about that since I was 16 years old, but I was now 30, 15 years later or so. I had not done anything to make myself a prepared person to be a spiritual leader. So thinking I had lost it, the poignancy of that loss and the depression I went into and the anger I felt at myself and the sense of loss was so enormous and unacceptable. I could not live with it. I did everything I could for 15 years to become the person I had thought I could not attain, with no hope of attainment. I actually did workshops, meditation retreats, read books, went to seminaries, you name it. I did all that for 15 years, 5 of it full time, and finally ended up being ordained and went, I guess I did make it. But the richness of my spiritual life, with its negatives and the positives of that journey, is invaluable to me. And it's part of the reason that I can stand up and talk to you about loss and say, don't fret too much. You can succeed. Now, for me, 15 years is even worse than Odysseus's return. But he was a smarter guy than me. This process of returning to where you thought you were originally, but you're richer in the return. Does that make sense? You can have cancer and say at the end, thank you to cancer. I hear people say it all the time. And the warrior energy is part of what can give you the gusto to get back there. The warrior is someone who goes aggressively for what they want. They are single-minded. They are on purpose. They do not let pain stop them. They have a willingness to go to the point of success. This is the warrior energy. And I met a woman very recently, a friend of a friend, who had been a surgeon and a potter, was doing art and was a potter, and I think perhaps it was working with pots might have helped this, but she got carpal tunnel. She got carpal tunnel and she went to have the operation and they cut the nerve that controls the thumb. So she could not be a surgeon, right? So she went instead. When I met her, it had only been about half a year, but she went to Florence for 2 years to study sculpting. And she comes back and she's pouring molten metal into molds that she has made from the sculptures she has made to do castings with molten metal. If you've ever thought about what it takes to take molten metal and pour it into a mold, you're dealing with death. You make a mistake and it burns your foot off. You make a mistake and it splatters and burns a hole wherever a drop lands. And she's playing with fire, literally. Ferocious in her transformation from surgeon to artist, right? So later in the night, I was really impressed with that. Later in the night, I said, so how did she told me the backstory about the thumb and all that. And I told her my story, which I just told you. And she goes, I could see the warrior pop up, which was always been there, but now I saw it by definition. She said, yeah, I just make a decision and I do it. I don't look. Now, how many of you have that clean and full expression of the warrior, but it changed her life circumstance? I mean, how many people do y'all know who went to Florence for 2 years to study art? I was so impressed. It's hard to be a surgeon anyway, but to go to Florence, good honor, right? And the full transformation of who she is, I'm sure, is happening through this process of loss and recreation of who she is, right? Powerful expression of the warrior energy. Not given just to men, not just to people who go to war, not just to the highest achievers, but to all of us. We have the capacity for this archetype to arise in us, but we might have to cultivate it. We might have to look at those movies like Braveheart and Patton and not go, oh, those guys, they're so aggressive. Do you know what I mean? We might have to say there's something in it. Patton, in the movie Patton, if I remember it right, he says the reason we go to war is to reconnect with valor and courage and those things. And mechanized war has made that much more difficult to get exactly. But I must say, this thing, the reason we want to cultivate our warrior energy is so that we can not only get something done, but we can recover when the inevitable fall comes. We can know how to get back up and do something about it. As the rapper was saying in his rap, stand up. When he said it, I could feel all the pain that it took for him to go through to get to that place. And then to be bold enough to say it out loud to others in pain. Stand up. That wasn't a tossed-off statement. It wasn't an aphorism he had read on some picture in somebody's office. This was well earned. And if he could say it, we can do it. We've all lost or will lose something vitally precious to us. If it's no more than your time or your health or your wealth or your loved one or your hope for the future or your birthright, we will lose it. And we will not be less for it if we continue the journey through the depths of hell back to sit on the right hand. You know, in the Apostles' Creed, it says something like that. It says, talking about Jesus. Remember this, for those of you who used to say this, I believe in the Holy Ghost, the Holy Catholic Church. Do you know that one? And Jesus Christ, who died and went to hell, and on the third day rose to sitteth on the right hand of God the Father. Right? Yeah, that's how that goes. And do you know that part? Remember that part? He went to hell. Part of the transformational process, even for Jesus, was to go to hell. So don't think you're really cursing someone when you say that. Just part of the journey. Let this be a lesson unto us, a day like today, when we remember those who died, so that we might have, I would used to say that we might have freedom, but I mean, sometimes it's just that we might have our way of life. They have done it for us. And in so doing, they have asked us to live worthy of that. Remember Saving Private Ryan? Many people died in the process of saving this last person in the family, all of which had been lost in war. And so they were sent to save Private Ryan, and most of the people who went to save him died. And he goes back to where the grave sites of those men were that died in Europe for him. And he says to his family, was my life worthy of it? It's a big question, isn't it? Your parents, your grandparents, the warriors, they have given their life for you. Shall we not take the power that is within us to apply it to our lives and to the possibilities that we can do something transformative with them? Shall we not apply ourselves to that with the vigor of a warrior, so that when we ask the question, was our life worthy of all that has been given to us, we could say, I did. And knowing that somewhere along the line, you will absolutely doubt that that you are on that path. But that hell of doubting and wondering and not being the person you want to be is part of the journey. So never consider yourself lost. You're just exploring. And one day you will get there. Let us pray. Let's take stock. Where are we? Some of us are in hell, some in purgatory, some in heaven. Where are we now? Are we not all on the journey? And the journey isn't a straight line. Let us hold compassion for those who have died and for those who suffer from having served. And let us have compassion for our foolish mistakes and where we have failed and fallen and given up and cried in pity for ourselves. let us have compassion for ourselves. And know this is the cycle of life. The transformative journey. And let's open a trap, a door, and at least extend an invitation for that warrior inside us that shall not be defeated. Even if that defeat is the opposite of surrender. We shall grow, unfold, and become. And what we become will be more than what we lost. Let us give thanks that the game of life is interesting enough to keep our attention. Bless us all. Amen.
I hope you got something out of today's service. We intend to bring you things that will help you in your life become more of who you want to be, give you the freedom of forgiveness and the hope of expectancy that your life will unfold in a way that brings you joy, happiness, and is a contribution to the world. If you would like to contribute to this ministry, please go to unitytriangle.org, hit the donate button, and it will lead you into an easy way of doing that. We thank you for your attention and look forward to seeing you again here.